This is CKnappenberger, and this is my case study, Module 16 for EDL854 in the summer of 2019. The case study is titled Missing Booster Club Funds. Looking at problem identification and analysis, the things that I know. George Washington Middle School serves approximately 450 students, so it's a smaller suburban school. It's located in the city of Warren, or the township of Warren. Over the past 10 years, the student population and the socioeconomic level has decreased as younger couples are moving out of Warren and kind of closer to the city. Most parents, moving into the suburban area. Most parents work at the textile mill that's in the industrial park in Warren. Despite all the changes that the community has experienced, involvement from the community and from parents has remained very strong. At athletic events, parents volunteer to collect gate proceeds and to sell concessions. It's heavily reliant on parent volunteers, and therefore they're the ones that run most of the money collecting things at extracurriculars. Daniel Stevens is the current principal. He's been there for 4 years. He's very well liked, and he works very well with these parent volunteers and parent leadership, such as the PTA. He has no assistant principal, so most of the administrative responsibilities fall to him. Mrs. Alice Bowman is a parent volunteer. She's had 3 children come through the school. Her youngest child is Lucy, is a daughter. She's in 7th grade. She's actually a very talented cheerleader, and because there aren't many cheerleaders at the middle school, she stands out in her ability to do stunts and different cheerleading moves. Lucy Bowman is recognized as an all-state cheerleader. She goes to try out at a local college, and then she makes the all-state cheerleading, so therefore she's invited to march in the New York City holiday parade. Mr. Stevens is very proud of Lucy. He speaks about it on a morning announcement. He's very proud of all of her accomplishments. Mrs. Bowman then requests a meeting with Mr. Stevens, and she's very professional about her meeting. She's on time. She has a full budget. She talks about how she's using things that are cost effective. She's not looking for a lavish vacation here for Lucy, but she is asking for the PTA to fund this. Mr. Stevens denies her request, stating that, the PTA is supposed to fund activities that would benefit all students, not just a single student. So he denies it. Mrs. Bowman again requests and says that he should reconsider, and he's very firm in his statement that that cannot be done because the PTO funds need to be used for multiple students. Mrs. Bowman still is a parent volunteer, and a couple days after the meeting with Mr. Stevens, she does come to volunteer and collects entrance fees for the last home basketball game. Mr. Stevens talks about how he is confident in his volunteers and the procedures that he has laid out so that money is collected. Therefore, he doesn't micromanage any of his volunteers. He lets them collect the funds and run the concession stands, and he very rarely checks in on them during the athletic events. Mr. Dumas is a parent. He speaks to Mr. Stevens during the course of the night of the basketball game, and he talks about how he mentions that he paid his entrance with a $50 bill. He's just cashed his paycheck, and that's kind of all that he had. Mr. Stevens mentions that that's fine. They'll take any kind of denomination of bills. So Mr. Stevens does know that there should be a $50 bill in the collection of the entrance fees. After the event, he counts the money with a security guard, Mr. Stevens, so he locks up the gym, he puts everything away, he does everything he's supposed to, and then he starts to count the money out of the bags. Mrs. Bowman had written a note in there that 10 of the tickets from the sales at the door were thrown away, and therefore the funds aren't there because they were torn or ripped. Mr. Stevens also then, while he's counting, notices that there is no $50 bill in the gate proceeds. $50 would be the price of 10 tickets. So with this, that Mrs. Bowman has thrown them away, Mr. Stevens he's a little suspicious. Things that I need to know. Did the other parent at the gate, because there are 2, see the 10 tickets get thrown away? Did they see the ripped tickets? Did the other parent notice that happened? Does a $50 bill appear in any of the other profits? Was it maybe used to make change or something like that? Does Mrs. Bowman have an explanation? Is there something? These are the things that I need to know. Has anything like this ever happened with Mrs. Bowman before? Have funds gone missing? Have tickets been thrown away? And kind of what is the best way to discuss this with Mrs. Bowman? Bringing her in, talking to her over the phone, anything like that. Our problem is that Mrs. Bowman is a longtime parent volunteer at George Washington Middle School. She has expressed a financial need through the discussion about Lucy and her trip to New York City. And shortly after this discussion, money is missing from her collection at an athletic event. Looking at the proposed plan of action with appropriate strategies, My plan of action has 2 areas of focus. First is recovering lost money or the funds from the collection, and the other is providing any kind of assistance to the Bowman family that they may need. So in the first part of my plan of action, looking at recovering the money, we need to reach out to the business office for advice. We need to ask the business office kind of what they think we should do moving forward, how this should be handled, how it has been handled in the past, and kind of what to do from there. Investigate where the money could be. This means looking at security cam footage, if there is any in the gym where the collection area is. Maybe look at having some cameras put in there if that is an issue. Also bringing in Mrs. Bowman to ask her about the event, explaining the situation, having that business administrator or the representative present because Mr. Stevens does not have an assistant principal. So therefore he needs to look at having someone else there to kind of discuss this and kind of follow board policy, district policy. Offer her an opportunity to repay the money if it is that she has taken it, and handle any situation that occurs from there. So either having her repay it, having to deal with, if she denies that she did take the money, and kind of anything that may happen from there. Also, anything that she mentions as being a difficult situation for her family. Finally, the last thing is that we need to reevaluate the ticket sales procedures. We need to bring in all of our parent volunteers, have a meeting, discuss how things get handled, as far as if we're throwing away tickets that are destroyed, if we're collecting money, kind of making change, anything like that, how that is to be done. The other plan of action, again, having to deal with the Bowman family. We're going to talk to Mrs. Bowman, obviously, so we need to make sure that she's not having any issues with her family. Are they in need of financial assistance? Do they need help with something? Has something gone on in the house that, perhaps we as a school community can help them with? Offer them that school support. Can we do something for you? We want to make sure that Mrs. Bowman, because she is a longtime volunteer, that she feels like she's a valued part of this school community because she is, and all of our parent volunteers are. So we kind of want to make sure that she still feels that way even after this discussion. The other thing is that having Lucy's guidance counselor meet with her to discuss any issues. Again, we do not want to be bringing up anything about the money or anything like that. Just having the guidance counselor have a check-in with Lucy to see if there's anything that Lucy needs or anything that's going on that Lucy may need to talk about. Strategies for implementation. First is following district policy. Talking to the business office, getting their advice first. How should this be handled? How should things go? And also having that representative from that office when talking to or meeting with Mrs. Bowman. We need to handle the situation with firmness, but also with compassion. They obviously have expressed some kind of financial need by asking for the money for Lucy, so maybe we need to think about how this can be handled. Allow Mrs. Bowman to explain. Maybe there's a reasonable explanation for this. It was used to make change, she took it, the funds are there, whatever it may be. Offer school support for the family. So that being, is it a parent-run fundraiser? Again, keeping the school out of it because we've already discussed how PTA funds cannot be used for a single student. So we don't want to do that, but we want to kind of offer any kind of support the school can give. And lastly, the strategy for implementation is examining ticket collection procedures. Review them with all parent volunteers. Bring them in, have a review, and if they can't come in for the meeting, perhaps meeting with them one-on-one the next time each parent volunteers to know that they understand how this should work. Category 3, resolve the issues based on the promotion of success for all students. So what's best for our students in this situation? What's best for our students is adults providing consistent and appropriate support for their activities, all of their activities in school and out, and having those trusted adults act honestly while supporting those student activities. So data for best practice. First looking is that Mr. Stevens should not fund Lucy's trip. This is sound practice for him. PTO monies were raised to support projects that would benefit the majority of students. So the PTA is for the whole population, not individual students. So that is number one. That's a sound practice. The next thing is looking at the fact that the Bowman family needs assistance in some way. They were meeting to request that the PTA fund a trip that their daughter was asked to go on. So Mrs. Bowman's behavior shows that the family may be struggling financially. So therefore, we need to meet and discuss ways that the school community may be able to help. We understand that the socioeconomic status has changed recently, but we want to be able to support our families if we can. Finally, Mrs. Bowman needs to be confronted. Again, the total didn't reflect the amount that should have included those 10 tickets that Mrs. Bowman claimed were torn. Money is missing, and she needs to explain that. There might be a great explanation, and we might find out that she can't volunteer anymore. Either way, we kind of need to get to the bottom of that immediately so that funds aren't going missing. More funds aren't going missing. Debriefing the problem. Things that I'm thinking, feeling, and valuing. throughout this case study, I'm thinking that Mrs. Bowman may be reluctant to meet with Mr. Stevens. She may be embarrassed, she may be guilty, we're not sure, but I'm thinking that she may be reluctant to have this meeting. I'm feeling disappointed in the loss of trust in parent volunteers. They're handling our money often at George Washington Middle School, and so I'm feeling a little disappointed in the whole situation. And finally, I'm valuing the fact that the Bowman's family's contribution to the school community. They have continually contributed to the school community, and so we want to continue to have that happen. Unresolved issues after all of this is Mrs. Bowman's account of money collection. What happened? Other explanations, for the missing $50. What could other explanations be? I'm not sure. The other volunteer parent's explanation or statement, the other person collecting tickets at the door. Is this easily fixed with the fact that they did see those ripped tickets and we're not really sure where the $50 went? What is the next step if Mrs. Bowman denies the accusations of all this missing money? Kind of what should we do next as a district? And finally, things that are still unresolved is how the Bowman family is going to feel towards the school and Mr. Stevens moving forward after this incident and the meeting that could result from it. Looking at my reflection of Standard 8, how did I promote the academic success and personal well-being of every student by ensuring effective and efficient management of the school? Mr. Stevens has ensured that the PTA funds would only be used to benefit the majority of the students. Actions will be taken to recover the loss of funds in order to benefit the students so that this money can go towards the students. Money collection will be reviewed in order to secure the funds for students. Again, we're managing all of our procedures to make sure that everyone understands them and that these funds are being used, collected, and then used for the students. I'm ensuring the academic success and personal well-being by promoting social learning for every student. Lucy, meeting with her guidance counselor, is going to ensure that her social needs are being met at school. We want to ensure that proper procedures are being followed for all extracurricular activities so that students continue to have these activities. And finally, continuing to have parent volunteers at these events will ensure that students can still have these activities. Mr. Stevens is only one person, so we want to make sure that we're continuing to have these parent volunteers and that we're still creating a welcoming environment for them. Next, I ensured the academic and personal well-being of every student by promoting academic learning. All students will now benefit from the PTA funds used for whole school projects, and that it's not just being used for one student or single student, so we want to make sure that those academic programs are being promoted. All parents are still being invited to volunteer. Again, we're just reviewing procedures for them. We're not limiting parent volunteers. We're not saying parents can't volunteer, especially with the Reading Buddies program that was listed, that academic kind of learning that's happening for the students. We want to make sure that the parents still feel welcome to come do that. And then lastly, meeting with Lucy will ensure that she is functioning properly academically. Again, we're meeting with her, having her guidance counselor just check in just to make sure she's okay, see if there's anything that Lucy needs to talk about or anything that she's been noticing or anything that she may need help with. Lastly, these are the sources where the case study came from. Thank you.